Let's talk about something that sits at the very core of every relationship, something that, when it's broken, shakes the foundation of everything you've built together. Trust. The invisible thread that connects two people, the energy that makes love feel safe, communication feel real, and vulnerability feel worth it. When that trust is shattered, whether it's through lies, betrayal, neglect, or simply years of silence and disconnection, it feels like the ground beneath your feet disappears. And you start to wonder, can this ever be rebuilt? Can what's been lost ever be restored? The truth is, yes, it can, but it won't come through empty promises or temporary fixes. It starts with something raw, something uncomfortable, something most people run from: radical honesty, not half-truths, not rehearsed apologies, not words crafted to protect your image or avoid guilt. Radical honesty is the moment you drop your armor and face yourself and the other person with complete transparency. It's when you stop hiding behind the version of yourself you want them to see, and you finally reveal the version you've been avoiding. Because let's be real, trust doesn't get broken by the big things alone. It dies slowly, piece by piece, through the little lies, the half-kept promises, the conversations that never happen, the emotions that get buried instead of spoken. And to rebuild it, you've got to bring light to every shadow that's lived in that space. You've got to be willing to say, here's what I did, here's why I did it, and here's the part of me I've been afraid to show you. That level of truth takes courage most people never access. But if you can step into it, it becomes the first real bridge between pain and healing. You can't rebuild trust from the outside in. You rebuild it from the inside out. That means before you can be honest with someone else, you have to get brutally honest with yourself. You've got to ask, what part did I play in this disconnect? Because it's never just about what they did to you or what you did to them. It's about what you allowed to linger, what you avoided, what you silenced. Radical honesty forces you to confront the part of you that contributed to the break, even when your ego wants to point all the blame outward. And when you do that, something shifts, the energy changes. You stop approaching the relationship from a place of defensiveness and start moving from truth. You stop talking to be right and start speaking to be understood. That's where real intimacy begins again. Because truth, no matter how hard it is, creates emotional safety. And safety is the soil where trust begins to grow again. Think about it. When someone lies to you, it's not the words that hurt most. It's the feeling that you can no longer rely on what's real. The whole fabric of the relationship starts to feel uncertain. But when someone looks you in the eyes, owns their truth, and doesn't flinch, something inside you says, okay, maybe I can start believing again. It's not about perfection, it's about presence. It's not about having all the right answers. It's about standing in your truth no matter how uncomfortable it is. Radical honesty isn't just about confession, it's about alignment. It's when your words, actions, and energy all tell the same story. It's when the person standing in front of you matches the one behind closed doors. When what you say you value actually shows up in how you treat people, how you listen, how you follow through. That's the kind of honesty that builds credibility over time. That's the honesty that makes people feel safe to open up again. I've seen people try to rebuild trust with apologies and promises, but you and I both know that words are easy. You can say, I'll do better. But if your energy doesn't change, if your habits don't change, those words mean nothing. Radical honesty isn't just telling the truth, it's living it, breathing it, embodying it. It's when the truth becomes the standard you live by, not the exception you resort to when you get caught. So many relationships collapse not because two people don't love each other, but because they're both living behind emotional masks. They're afraid to show the truth of who they are. They're afraid to say, I feel insecure, I feel lonely, I feel like I'm not enough. But here's the thing, when you hide your truth to protect yourself, you also hide the part of you that can truly connect. The walls you build to keep out pain also keep out love. Radical honesty tears down those walls brick by brick. Now, being radically honest doesn't mean being reckless with your words. It's not about dumping your pain or your anger onto someone else. It's not about using honesty as a weapon. It's about being real while still being responsible. It's saying, this is how I feel, and I'm willing to understand how you feel too. It's about truth with empathy, truth with intention, truth that brings you closer instead of driving you further apart. When you bring radical honesty into a relationship, you create a new kind of rhythm. Suddenly, conversations become deeper. The silence that once felt heavy starts to lift. The energy between you becomes clearer because there's no longer a performance happening, just two people standing in truth, trying to rebuild something real. And it's in those moments that forgiveness becomes possible, because forgiveness can't exist without truth. You can't forgive what you're still pretending didn't happen. You can't heal what you're still hiding. Every time you choose honesty, even when it's hard, you send a message that says, you can trust me again. Not because I'm perfect, but because I'm real. Because I'm willing to tell you the truth, even when it makes me look bad. Because your peace and our connection matter more to me than my ego or my comfort. That's the kind of integrity that slowly melts away the residue of betrayal and replaces it with something stronger than before, authentic connection. And I know some of you might be thinking, but what if I tell the truth and they can't handle it? What if it pushes them away? And that's a fair fear. But here's the reality: if the truth pushes them away, it's because the relationship was built on illusion, not reality. Truth never destroys what's real. It only destroys what's fake. The people meant to be in your life won't be scared by your truth. They'll respect it. They'll feel it. And if they're willing to rebuild, they'll meet you in that space with their own honesty too. See, the moment you commit to radical honesty, everything changes, not just your relationships, but you. Because you can't practice honesty with others and still lie to yourself. You start noticing where you've been avoiding the truth in your own life, where you've been pretending to be okay when you're not, where you've been settling, where you've been tolerating what drains you. Honesty becomes a lifestyle. And the more you live in truth, the more peace you create around you. Honesty doesn't just rebuild trust. It restores integrity to your soul. It brings you back into alignment with your own heart. Because deep down, every human being craves one thing: to feel safe enough to be themselves. And that's what radical honesty gives you. It's freedom, it's clarity, it's connection. It's saying, this is who I am. I'm not perfect, but I'm real. I'm not flawless, but I'm here, willing to rebuild, willing to grow, willing to start again. The people who have the most fulfilling relationships aren't the ones who never fall. They're the ones who refuse to hide when they do. They face the hard truths, they own their mistakes, and they use those moments to create a deeper bond than before. That's what real strength looks like. Not avoiding conflict, not pretending everything's fine, but standing in truth and saying, let's deal with this together. You see, when trust breaks, you can't fix it with time alone. Time doesn't heal what truth avoids. Time only works when truth is present, because truth gives time something to work with. Without it, all you're doing is waiting in pain, circling the same story over and over again. But when you bring radical honesty into the picture, you give time purpose. You give the relationship oxygen. You give love a chance to breathe again. And that's the beauty of it. When you rebuild from truth, you don't just go back to how things were. You create something stronger. You create a connection rooted in authenticity, not illusion. You create a relationship where both people feel seen, heard, and safe enough to be vulnerable again. That's when real intimacy begins, not the kind that fades when things get hard, but the kind that deepens because both of you are committed to showing up fully, no matter what. So if you're sitting in a place where trust feels broken, where you're not sure if things can ever be the same here, start with radical honesty, not just with them, with yourself. Ask the hard questions. Tell the truth even when your voice shakes, because honesty doesn't just rebuild relationships, it rebuilds you. And when you stand in truth, when you choose transparency over fear, when you commit to showing up as your whole self, you create the foundation for something unshakable. Because love built on truth is the only love that lasts. Rebuilding trust isn't just about saying the right words or promising change. It's about proving it through consistent action. People don't believe words anymore. They believe patterns. They believe what they see, what they feel, what they experience over time. You can talk about how sorry you are and how much you've learned, how deeply you cared, but if your behavior doesn't match those words, all they'll ever hear is noise. Consistency is the language of trust. It's the evidence that transforms doubt into belief. When someone's trust has been broken, they're not looking for perfection, they're looking for reliability. They're watching to see if your words carry weight, if your actions align with what you say, if you show up when you say you will, if you follow through when no one's watching. Because trust doesn't rebuild itself in grand gestures. It rebuilds itself in the small, everyday moments where you prove that you mean what you say. And that's the part most people underestimate. They think one big apology or one emotional conversation will fix years of inconsistency. But that's not how it works. When trust has been damaged, every small decision becomes a test. Every action becomes data. People start looking for evidence that the change is real, and they have every right to. It's not about punishment. It's about safety. They're trying to see if it's safe to believe again. Consistency is what tells their nervous system it's okay to open up again. It's what allows the walls to slowly come down, the doubt to fade, the wounds to heal. Every time you show up with honesty, every time you choose patience, every time you follow through, you're making a deposit into that emotional bank account of trust. But when you say one thing and do another, when you make promises and break them, you're withdrawing from it. Eventually, if the withdrawals outweigh the deposits, the account goes bankrupt, and so does the relationship. You can't rebuild trust with emotion alone. Emotion sparks change, but consistency sustains it. The passion you feel when you say, I'll never do that again, is powerful. But if it doesn't turn into daily discipline, it fades. Real transformation isn't what you do when you feel inspired. It's what you do when it's inconvenient, when no one's clapping for you, when you're tired, when you'd rather revert back to old patterns but choose not to. That's when consistency becomes character, and character is what makes people believe again. Because people don't trust the person who speaks the loudest, they trust the one who shows up again and again, even after failing. You rebuild trust by becoming predictable in your integrity. You rebuild it by being the same person when they're watching and when they're not. You rebuild it when your energy becomes steady, When your actions are no longer reactive, when you stop talking about what you're going to do and start doing it quietly day after day. Consistency doesn't mean you'll never make mistakes again. It means when you do, you own them fast. You don't hide, you don't make excuses, you don't disappear into guilt. You face it, you fix it, and you keep moving forward. That kind of consistency builds confidence in the relationship. It says, I'm not perfect, but I'm reliable. You can count on me to tell the truth, to show up, to try again. That's what heals the wounds words can't. But let's get honest. It's not easy to stay consistent, especially when you're dealing with shame or guilt. There's a part of you that wants to rush the process, to earn forgiveness quickly so you can stop feeling the discomfort. You want them to trust you again now. You want things to go back to normal. But rebuilding trust doesn't move at your speed. It moves at the speed of the other person's healing. You can't control how long it takes them to feel safe again. What you can control is how you show up in that space. You can control whether you stay steady or get defensive. You can control whether your actions show patience or pressure. The moment you start expecting instant forgiveness, you make it about you again, and that's where most people lose it. Because trust is never rebuilt through entitlement. It's rebuilt through humility. It's rebuilt through showing that you care more about their peace than your comfort. You can't demand trust, you earn it through consistent presence, consistent empathy, and consistent effort. And I want you to hear this: consistency isn't just about proving something to someone else. It's about becoming the kind of person you can trust again. Because when you've broken trust, whether with another person or even with yourself, the real work begins inside. You've got to rebuild self-trust first. You've got to start keeping the promises you make to yourself. You've got to start following through on the small things, not because anyone's watching, but because you said you would. When you become consistent with yourself, your health, your word, your growth, your discipline, you start to walk differently. There's a steadiness that shows up in how you love, how you communicate, how you carry yourself. You stop needing validation because you know you're living in alignment. That energy becomes magnetic. People feel it. They begin to sense that you're not acting from guilt or manipulation. You're acting from integrity. And that integrity is what rebuilds the bridge that broke. Because consistency creates predictability, and predictability creates safety. When someone can look at you and say, I know who you're going to be tomorrow because you've shown me who you are today, that's when they start to relax again. That's when connection starts to rebuild itself. Think about any strong relationship, romantic, family, business. It thrives because both sides can count on each other. They may disagree, they may clash, but there's a foundation of reliability. You know that when things get hard, that person won't disappear. You know that even when emotions run high, they'll come back to the table. That kind of consistency isn't built in a week, it's built in repetition. And repetition is the mother of trust. You can't microwave trust back into existence. You've got to slow cook it with consistency. You've got to keep showing up when they're still skeptical, when they're still questioning, when they're still healing. You've got to keep showing up even when it feels unfair, because this isn't about fairness, it's about repair. You're not trying to win a debate, you're trying to restore connection, and that takes time, patience, and endurance. But here's the reward: you become someone unstoppable in the process. Because the person who learns to stay consistent under pressure becomes unshakable. You stop needing others to validate your change, because your consistency becomes your own evidence. You know who you're becoming, and you let your actions do the talking. People can doubt your words, but they can't deny your consistency. There's a deep peace that comes when you finally start living in alignment with your word. You wake up knowing you're not performing, you're being. You no longer need to convince anyone that you've changed because your energy communicates it before your mouth does. That's what authenticity feels like. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, it's calm, grounded, and steady. And let me tell you something powerful: consistency rebuilds more than trust, it rebuilds hope. Because when trust is broken, what people lose isn't just belief in you, they lose belief in the idea that things can ever feel good again. They lose hope that love can feel safe, that connection can feel easy, that people can change. Your consistency reignites that hope. Every day you show up with integrity, you give them another reason to believe again, not just in you, but in the possibility of healing. And maybe this isn't just about another person. Maybe it's about you rebuilding trust with yourself after you've let yourself down. Maybe you've made promises to grow, to change, to stop living small, and you've broken them. That's okay. You don't rebuild that trust by punishing yourself. You rebuild it by showing up differently today. You rebuild it by saying, I may have fallen yesterday, but today I'm keeping my word, and then doing that again tomorrow. It's not about how fast you move. It's about how consistently you move. Progress doesn't happen in leaps. It happens in steady steps. The same is true for relationships. The small, repeated acts of honesty, reliability, and care become the glue that holds everything together. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be present, persistent, and patient. When someone sees you showing up consistently, Not out of guilt, not out of fear, but out of genuine commitment. They start to lean in again. Their heart starts to soften. The energy starts to shift. The past doesn't disappear, but it loses its control because consistency builds new evidence, evidence that says, this time it's different. And one day you'll look around and realize the walls that once separated you have been replaced by bridges. You'll feel the connection that once felt impossible begin to flow again. Not because you forced it, but because you stayed steady long enough for healing to happen naturally. That's the gift of consistency. It doesn't demand trust, it earns it. So if you want to rebuild trust, don't just apologize, evolve. Don't just promise practice. Don't just talk, transform. Because in the end, people don't trust what you say, they trust what you do over and over again. And when your actions finally align with your heart, when your consistency speaks louder than your past, that's when true healing begins. Connection, real connection, is the heartbeat of every relationship. It's what keeps love alive, communication open, and purpose shared. But when trust breaks, connection suffers. You can be in the same room under the same roof and still feel 1,000 miles apart. You can talk every day and still not feel understood because connection isn't about proximity. It's about presence. It's about being fully there, body and soul, heart and attention. And when that presence disappears, when emotional walls go up, you start living next to each other instead of with each other. But here's the beautiful truth. Connection can be rebuilt. It doesn't vanish forever. It just gets buried under pain, fear, and misunderstanding. And to bring it back, you have to go beyond fixing the past. You have to grow into something new together. Shared growth reignites lasting connection because it takes two people who are willing to stop fighting each other and start fighting for something bigger than their pain. See, when trust is broken, what people often do is retreat. They shrink. They go into survival mode. One person becomes defensive, the other distant. The relationship turns into a cycle of protection instead of connection. But the only way to heal that is to break the pattern, to create an environment where both people feel safe enough to grow again. Because growth heals what apology alone cannot. You can apologize 100 times, but if the relationship doesn't evolve, it'll stay trapped in the same emotional loop. Shared growth is what takes you out of that loop. It's when both people commit to learning, to listening, to changing, to becoming more aware. It's when you stop asking who's right and start asking how can we rise? Because when you start focusing on growth instead of blame, something powerful happens. The relationship transforms from a battlefield into a classroom. Every challenge becomes a lesson. Every disagreement becomes a doorway to understanding. Every setback becomes an opportunity to become stronger together. Growth changes the energy between you. Suddenly, instead of being stuck in the story of what happened, you start writing a new one together. And here's something most people never realize. Connection doesn't come from agreement. It comes from alignment. You can disagree and still be deeply connected if your hearts are aligned in growth. When both people are committed to becoming better, the relationship becomes a space of evolution instead of stagnation. And that's what keeps it alive. When trust is broken, one of the most powerful things you can do is create new experiences of growth together. Go through something that stretches both of you. It could be learning something new, traveling somewhere different, building something together, even facing a challenge as a team. Because when you go through growth together, you create new emotional memories, ones that replace pain with progress, fear with excitement, distance with closeness. Think about it. When was the last time you really grew with someone? Not just coexisted, not just talked about the past, but actually evolved together. That's the spark that reignites connection. When you start doing the work together, reading, learning, reflecting, taking accountability, you stop being two people trying to fix what broke and start becoming two people creating something unbreakable. Shared growth means you're no longer looking backward. You're both moving forward. You're not trying to return to how things were, because how things were is what broke in the first place. You're creating a new foundation, one built on deeper awareness, stronger communication, and mutual respect. And that's where real connection lives. Connection thrives in growth because growth requires vulnerability. You can't evolve without being open. You can't grow without admitting what you don't know, without showing your fears, your needs, your desires. That kind of openness reawakens the emotional intimacy that's been missing. When you say, I don't have it all figured out, but I want to learn, you give the other person permission to do the same. You stop performing and start connecting. Too many relationships die because people stop growing. They stop asking questions, stop exploring each other, stop stretching beyond their comfort zones. They start assuming instead of discovering. They start defending instead of understanding. But love isn't a static emotion. It's a living force that needs to be nurtured. And the moment you stop growing together, you start growing apart. If you want to rebuild connection, you've got to become intentional again. Intentional about your communication, your time, your energy. You've got to make connection a daily practice, not an occasional effort. That means putting the phone down when they're speaking, looking them in the eyes, actually listening instead of waiting to reply. It means expressing appreciation, not just when things are good, but especially when they're hard. It means being curious again, asking how they're feeling, what they're dreaming, what's challenging them lately. Because connection isn't something you find once and keep, it's something you create every day. The most powerful relationships are built by people who grow individually and together. They don't depend on each other for happiness, but they use their happiness to fuel each other's growth. They don't say, "You complete me." They say, "We complement each other," because connection built on dependence is fragile. Connection built on shared evolution is unbreakable. And shared growth doesn't mean everything's easy. Growth is messy. It means facing parts of yourself that make you uncomfortable. It means taking responsibility even when it hurts. It means having difficult conversations without shutting down or lashing out. But those moments, those raw, real, uncomfortable moments are where deeper intimacy is born. Because nothing connects two people more than going through something real together and coming out stronger on the other side. When you choose growth, you're saying, "I'm willing to face the discomfort for the sake of our connection." That's love in its highest form, not the kind that just feels good when everything's easy, but the kind that stays, heals, and expands when things get hard. Connection is reignited when both people start seeing each other again, not through the lens of the past, but through the lens of potential. When you stop saying, "You always," or "You never," and start saying, "I see how you're trying." When you stop focusing on what went wrong and start recognizing what's changing. When you celebrate progress, not perfection, that's how you rebuild connection. It's amazing what happens when someone feels seen again, when they feel understood instead of judged, when they feel appreciated instead of taken for granted. That energy alone can shift everything, because connection isn't built in grand declarations. It's built in the little moments when you say, "I'm here, I see you, I'm with you." Shared growth means learning to speak love in action, not just words. It means being intentional with your presence, your attention, your kindness. It means showing that you're not just in this to repair something broken. You're in this to create something better. That mindset transforms a relationship from fragile to formidable. And let's be real, there will still be moments of tension, moments where the old pain tries to resurface, moments where doubt whispers, "What if it happens again?" That's natural. But every time you choose growth over fear, every time you choose understanding over ego, you reinforce the connection. You build new emotional muscle. You teach your hearts that it's safe to love again. Connection doesn't thrive in perfection. It thrives in progress. It thrives when both people are willing to keep showing up, keep learning, keep evolving. You can't demand connection. You create it through shared effort, shared learning, shared vulnerability, and that's what makes it last. Because when you grow together, you don't just rebuild what was lost. You build something that can't be broken by the same things again. You build a connection that's rooted in awareness, fed by truth, and strengthened by action. That's the kind of connection that endures, the kind that makes you look at each other years later and say, "We've been through it all, and we're stronger because we chose to grow through it together." Because when love evolves with you, it never dies. It transforms, it deepens, it becomes something far more powerful than what it was before. And that's when you know the connection is real again.